The movie begins in 1990, where we see a lady named Tina Salvador singing and driving by herself along a lonely road at night. Suddenly a car with an invisible driver draws close to her. She is passed by the vehicle, who then waits for her at a stop sign. Tina, frightened, passes and continued driving. She stops at a neighboring gas station to ask for assistance since she thinks she is being followed, but it seems deserted. The driver then makes a stop at the same location and opens the trunk to retrieve some belongings. Tina flees from the man and hides in a nearby bush until she sees a truck approaching on the road. She runs to the middle of the road and the truck driver stops. The sheriff of Kern County, Joe Deacon, is called to a store owner's complaint the following day about his neon sign, which keeps getting broken. The shop owner says it's the third time in 2 months that the sign is always broken by an unknown person. Deke, a former detective who had a breakdown following a particular case years previously, is now a single man. Deke returns to the station and meets with his boss, who tells him about a suspect, J.J. Kendrick. He tells him about some evidence ready at the hospital. Deke then goes to the hospital to collect this evidence, but the doctor refuses to give it to him unless he gives her an authorized signature. On his way out, he meets his car about to be apprehended for wrong parking. He identifies as a police officer and instructs them to release it. When he returns to the station, he sees a talk section where a young, hotshot lead investigator known as Jimmy Baxter, who is being interviewed by some journalist. Later at night he goes to have a coffee with a friend and Jim comes over to introduce himself. As they gather information for a recent murder case that could be connected to a string of previous murders involving prostitutes, he is paired up with the lead investigator Jimmy Baxter. Deke and Jimmy accompany other law enforcement to the residence of the most recent victim, Julie Brock, along with Jimmy's partner detective Jamie Estrada. She is discovered bound and stabbed, and there is evidence that the murderer returned to the scene and moved the body. The coroner, Flo Doonigan, welcomes Deke and is familiar with his background. Deke discovers a viewing area with a view of the flat across from the building. He observes that the killer's method is reminiscent of the case that has tormented him, in which he discovered 2 victims bound with bags over their heads and found naked. Later that night, Deke returns for a patrol that night and drives through the streets of LA and stops to get some burgers. In the next scene, a woman called Rhonda Rathbun is finishing an evening jog with a friend before they separate ways. A brown vehicle that resembles the one that followed Tina begins to pursue Rhonda. The next day, she is promptly listed as missing. When they capture Stan Peters, a suspect who became a registered sex offender after being caught urinating in public, Jimmy calls in Deke. Stan sobs when Jimmy displays a picture of Julie to him, saying he got nothing to do with this. Deke then puts a call to Jimmy, after which Jimmy mentions Mary Roberts, another victim. Stan gets up from his seat and acts as if he knows Deke is on the other side of the mirror. Deke then visits Flo to inquire about Julie. Although she was known to adhere to a rigorous vegan diet, it was found that she had half-digested roast beef in her stomach. Deke and Flo then go out to eat together. Flo mentions an incident connected to Deke's infamous case and wears a keychain featuring a fired bullet. Later, Deke visits Julie's apartment to continue his investigation, and after the landlady comes to see how he is doing, he speaks with her. She says she thought they were done investigating. She also says she called an engineer to fix the refrigerator. She goes to get a bear as evidence, while Deke sits to meditate on the case. Deke leases a room at a filthy hotel in the neighborhood with a prostitute-filled street outside. He keeps records of the victims from the last case and notices images of them coming to life, especially Mary Roberts. The next day, Jimmy finds out from Captain Carl Ferris that Deke had a breakdown as a result of his fixation with his prior case, which led to a heart attack, a divorce, and triple bypass surgery. Deke goes to a repair shop where he meets with the owner Jack. Deke inquiries for the order list. As he leaves, we see one of Jack's staff look at Deke suspiciously. Jimmy meets with Rhonda's parents to discuss his search for her. They offer some assistance by noting that she frequently had a red beret in her hair. He assures them he will find her. Authorities subsequently discover the body of another lady beneath a bridge, but Jimmy is certain that it is not Rhonda's by comparing the body with Rhoda's picture. They discover that the victim, like the majority of the other victims, was a prostitute. Jimmy informs Deke that Stan committed suicide the previous evening as they stand apart. Jimmy asks Deke to tell him about Mary Roberts, but he's called by another officer. Deke visits his ex-wife Marcia and asks about his daughters after having dinner with Jimmy's family. He subsequently meets up with Jimmy at a bar where they discuss the information they've gleaned on their investigation into the murders. Jimmy is also taken to the scene of the last case by Deke, who even shows him the spot where the remains were discovered. When Jimmy leaves, Deke drives through the streets and stops when he sees a car resembling the one the murder uses. The car owner, Albert Sparma, a worker at a repair company, comes out as Deke was inspecting the car. Albert disposes his bin which Deke collects to check through the content. He observes Albert as he moves about the day, picking up items like prostitutes. Soon after meeting Deke, Albert realized he was being followed. As he drove past him, he asked Deke how the trunk space was. Later, Albert is brought into the precinct for questioning. Tina is also present to report the earlier stalker incident. She recognizes Albert when she sees him come out of an elevator, but she is unable to correctly identify him as the stalker when Jimmy and Jamie show her pictures of previous offenders. Albert is bold, who Jimmy speaks with, admits to being fascinated with serial killers and murders like this, and even seems to become aroused by some of the crime scene photographs. The interrogation is terminated when Deke enters the room and violently takes Albert, pushing him up against a wall. Albert had falsely confessed to a crime 8 years before, so anything he says is unreliable, Jimmy learns from his second conversation with Ferris. He enters Deke's hotel room and is startled by the prior case's paperwork, but he still begs for his assistance in trying to get Albert. When he is not there, they enter his flat to search it, but when further police from that area arrive, they are forced to leave. The following evening, when Jimmy finds Albert alone, he offers to take him and Deke to the location of Rhonda's claimed body. When Jimmy arrives in the desert, Albert tricks him by giving him false directions to the body. In the end, Albert claims that he is only wasting Jimmy's time and that he has never killed anyone. As Jimmy continues his investigation, Albert mocks him by bringing up his wife and girls, labeling him a failing detective who is unable to defend his family. Albert is killed when Jimmy snaps and strikes him in the head with a shovel. Deke arrives to assist him as he sits there in disbelief over what he's done. In a subsequent flashback, it is revealed what happened on the night of Deke's case. After discovering 2 bodies, Deke heard a rustling in the bushes and shot, believing the murderer was about to emerge. Mary Roberts was actually the one who had been accidentally shot and died but had survived. By claiming that Mary had been stabbed to death, Ferris and Flo were able to hide the truth. Deke then directs Jimmy to make a number of holes and fill them before burying Albert in one of them. Jimmy keeps trying to persuade himself and Deke that Albert was actually their man the entire time. Deke then starts collecting and burning every piece of evidence he can find in Albert's residence. While watching his children play in the backyard, Jimmy sits outside, but his wife and daughters can see he is not feeling well. Jimmy receives an envelope from a police official who calls to say hello. Jimmy assumes Deke has located the proof they require to indict Albert because it is from Deke and contains the message "No Angels," along with a crimson beret. In actuality, Deke only purchased that beret with a pack to allay Jimmy's concerns and has since continued to destroy Albert's evidence in an effort to close the case. The movie ends here. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to get more our recaps.